successful scientific cover-up? And if so, why? Governments are charged with upholding the law, and no law on Earth is more basic than the law of gravity. No wonder the obvious anti-gravity capability of the UFO makes governments uncomfortable. Bravely, some astronauts have stated that they believe in the reality of the UFO and the capability of the UFO to defy gravity, while our giant rockets consume enormous amounts of fuel, putting a simple space capsule or Skylab in orbit. In the dark blue of space, in silence orbiting the Earth, the Skylab is the planetoid home of its crew. The crew is like the NASA test pilots in the X-15, busily occupied and concerned with the scientific work outlined for them by their NASA masters. Life support in Earth orbit is a scientific victory in itself and a major achievement for Earthlings. But outside alien intelligences are again observing the progress of man from Earth. 2 UFOs are photographed by an astronaut during a spacewalk. The hatch is open. The astronaut is working his problem. Again, 2 UFOs flit by. Just moving lights, something that could be easily ignored unless we obtained other pictures and other explanations. Actual pictures which could identify the UFO as a solid object with a mission and under intelligent control.
One of the most remarkable instances of UFO photography took place in 1968, here above the Boeing Space Laboratory, south of Renton, Washington. Several photographs were taken of a UFO by then 14-year-old Scott Silty. It showed its anti-gravity capabilities as it hovered over the center in 2 locations. His efforts produced probably the only detailed shots of a UFO materializing to show configuration and portholes. His junior high school instructor, Jim Holm, was given the negatives to develop. Holm said he didn't know what to expect, but became a believer when he saw what the young Silty had apparently captured on film.
When they came in that morning and they said, hey, we got the pictures we were talking about, naturally, you know, junior high students, you're a little bit reluctant to believe everything they say. But then, you know, as things proceeded, what happened was I developed the pictures, and we know the results now.
What is your impression of what that object is?
I'm always hesitant, but I would have to say that believing the students and the type of students they were, it almost definitely had to be some type of a flying object.
Right out there.
Right. And it's a little eerie. The thing that shook me up at first is I was reluctant to believe them. And when I printed or developed the film, I really couldn't see that much. But I was shocked. I have to admit, I was shocked when I put it in the enlarger. And through the enlarger, I could see a great deal more of what the object looked like.
Like the portholes.
Right. That was, I would say, the portholes was the most shocking part, because then it looked different than just a glow in the sky in a certain form, like you always hear the thing, you know, swamp gas and that sort of thing. But no swamp gas is going to have portholes or a configuration geometric the way that was.
One man who has spent the last 25 years researching and keeping track of UFO sightings in the United States is Seattle fireman Robert Gribble. He has spent his spare time gathering all data possible that will help him keep track of when and where they take place. The pins on this map indicate sightings in the U.S. for just 1 year. Over the past quarter century, he has come to some conclusions based on the number of sightings he has recorded.
We have received and recorded some 30,000 sightings since 1955.
Have you noticed any particular patterns that develop in pinpointing the UFO sightings on these maps?
No, we have found no marked pattern, although we do believe that they are following 2 procedures. One, a surveillance of the land areas, a very close surveillance, and a close surveillance of the people, and it seems to fluctuate from one to the other.
Now, through all these years of research, you must have drawn some conclusions about what they are, what the UFOs are.
Well, we firmly believe that what the people are seeing and those objects which we have classified as unknown are actually vehicles not manufactured on this planet.
How can you draw that conclusion? How do you know?
Well, the vehicles have been seen in the United States, and there are good records of this for the last 200 years, and actually the records go back into history for some 3,000 years. The same things that were seen then are being seen today.
We understand that there are several hot spots in the United States, UFO sighting areas, and one of them happens to be in the southwestern United States in Utah.
There have been a tremendous amount of sightings in the southwest over the years, with a very large concentration in the Utah area.
The Canadian UFO Report was one of the initial UFO publications to headline the story of the possibility that much of the early Mormon history tells of a contact with an alien intelligence, the angel Moroni. It opens the possibility that the founder of Mormonism, their prophet Joseph Smith, may have been one of the greatest of UFO contactees. Dr. Frank D. Salisbury, on the faculty of the State University of Utah in Logan, and himself a Mormon, does not doubt that possibility. He has stated publicly that he believes that his UFO study has established the probability that the Earth is being visited by UFOs that seem to be using the isolated area of eastern Utah as an Earth base. In March of 1975, a national tabloid newspaper circulated the following story of a UFO kidnapping. The producers of this motion picture interviewed Carl Higdon, who furnished the artist's conception of the android crewman from the UFO who kidnapped him and took him aboard the UFO to elsewhere. Higdon was given a physical examination in a tower by a huge TV-like eye, rejected, and was returned to the elk hunting area in Wyoming, where he was picked up. While on his 8-hour UFO trip, he encountered a teenage boy, 2 young girls, and a man in his 60s, also guests of the UFO intelligences. Upon his return, he suffered radiation symptoms with itching skin and burning eyes. Area Sheriff Ogburn and his deputy Ed Tierney investigated the incident. So did Dr. Leo Sprinkle of the University of Wyoming, who gives us this professional opinion as to the truth of this verified UFO kidnapping.
To whom it may concern, my impression of Carl Higdon is that he's a man of integrity with average education, but a keen sense of curiosity about the world around him. He's an outdoors man and seems to have developed good skills of estimating size and distance. Although the sighting of a single UFO witness often is difficult to evaluate, the indirect evidence supports the tentative conclusion that Carl Higdon is reporting sincerely the events that he experienced. Hopefully, further statements from other persons can be obtained to support the basic statement. Respectfully submitted by R. Leo Sprinkle, Ph.D., the University of Wyoming in Laramie.
UFO traffic in the Rocky Mountain area of Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico reached a high level in the November, December, and January period of 1975 and 76, with police departments reporting large cigar-shaped UFOs and other UFO types of spacecraft hovering for days at a time over cities in this area. 5 witnesses working in the open country around Snowflake and Holbrook in northeast Arizona had the most incredible personal UFO experience story to tell and passed lie detector tests in their telling of it before police and psychiatrist witnesses. 22-year-old Travis Walton suddenly disappeared one morning as the group was working in the open country. Dwayne Smith, Kenneth Peterson, Alan Dalis, Mike Rogers, and John Golette were involved in the significant UFO kidnapping incident in which a greenish blue light originating from a UFO overhead zapped Travis Walton into an invisible dimension from which he returned 5 days later. His brother tells of the incident.
He spent 5 days on a UFO, he thinks. Now, there is some small time loss in there. But for all intent and purposes, he spent 5 days on there. He did come in contact with some beings that are human-like, but they weren't human. And he had quite an experience. He said he doesn't remember anything about a blue light in the first encounter last Wednesday. The blue light that they saw, he said, at that instant, he felt like he got hit in the forehead with a baseball bat, and it knocked him out. And he woke up. He was aboard one of the craft. And they never spoke to him. They led him around by the hand. They wouldn't talk to him. They showed him this and that. And when they let him off, he woke up.
Did he say they were friendly creatures?
Smiled all the time, friendly. Never harmed him. They were just as nice as they could be. But there was a total lack of communication, either verbal or mental.
And he said that's what made him so upset, that he couldn't speak with them.
That's what he was very, very disgusted about. That nervous and just plain disgust. A chance of a lifetime, and they wouldn't cooperate.
Obviously, Dwayne, you know your own brother probably better than anybody else. Do you believe the story?
I've never seen him play a practical joke in his adult life.
A psychiatrist tells of his examination of Travis.
Our conclusion, which is absolute, is that this young man is not lying. There's no collusion involved, no attempted hoax or collusion with the family or anyone else. There's a rumor around that there's contracts. There are no such contracts. No motivation for a lie.
Any possibility of lying or hoax as you see it?
None whatsoever.
As we have indicated, UFOs can create a tremendous spatial energy flow. One of the most startling examples of that occurred several years ago on Vashon Island, which is located in the Pacific Northwest in Puget Sound, not far from Seattle, Washington. It was near the tiny town of Vashon that several UFO sightings had taken place in the late 1960s. So the fact that local residents had seen such phenomena was not startling. But the fact surrounding one of the incidents was unusual, to say the least.
So it was out in that area?
On the night of the 19th of February, 1968, Detective Lieutenant Terry Ullman was dispatched to an old gravel pit area west of town. Some young people had seen a UFO, and the King County Sheriff's Office was sent to investigate. The temperature was 50 degrees. Ullman tells of what he saw.
Well, there was a lot of ice. It really had no reason to actually be there. It wasn't that cold out.
And did it have a certain consistency or something unusual about it?
Well, it was 1.5 inches thick and was rather milky and bubble.
Mm-hmm. And what was the impression that you had, or why did you have the impression that it was some strange phenomenon that created this?
Well, I can't be sure about that, except it was entirely too warm out to have ice like that. One of the other officers had responded to a UFO call at that same location the night before.
The UFO energy flow had apparently left a solid sheet of ice as it supercooled the area below the UFO as it took off. At the freezing temperature of 32 degrees, it would take some 113 hours to freeze the pond 50 feet in diameter with a sheet of ice 2 inches thick, and the weather had not been that cold. The UFO did it. Because of official concealment, denials, and just plain ordinary bureaucratic cover-up during the 1950s and 60s, many cases of UFOs establishing themselves as a menace to commercial airlines' safety of flight had been concealed. One night, 10 of 85 passengers aboard an American Airlines commercial flight were injured when their pilot, Captain Ed Bachner, took evasive action to avoid a UFO encounter. It happened to flight number 966 on the night of 17 July 1957 on a flight from El Paso to Dallas, just 50 miles east of El Paso over Salt Flats, Texas. The UFO continued along the Gulf Coast to Gulfport, Mississippi, where it turned north. Traffic control radar tracked the UFO, and the military was alerted. In the vicinity of Meridian, Mississippi, the Wing Intelligence RB-47 electronic surveillance airplane tuned in the UFO's emission on its ALA-5 pulse analyzer. As it moved west toward
scientific cover-up. And if so, why? Governments are charged with upholding the law, and no law on earth is more basic than the law of gravity. No wonder the obvious anti-gravity capability of the UFO makes governments uncomfortable. Bravely, some lab is the planetoid home of its crew. The crew is like the NASA test pilots in the X-15, busily occupied and concerned with the scientific work outlined for them by their NASA masters. Life support in Earth orbit is a scientific victory in itself, and a major astronauts have stated that they believe in the reality of the UFO and the capability of the UFO to defy gravity, while our giant rockets consume enormous amounts of fuel, putting a simple space capsule or Skylab in orbit. In the dark blue of space, in silence orbiting the Earth, the sky 2 UFOs flit by. Just moving lights, something that could be easily ignored unless we obtained other pictures and other explanations. Actual pictures which could identify the UFO as a solid object with a mission and under intelligent achievement for Earthlings. But outside alien intelligences are again observing the progress of man from Earth. 2 UFOs are photographed by an astronaut during a spacewalk. The hatch is open. The astronaut is working his problem. Again,